All right. Hello everyone. Let's give it a few minutes to see if people start coming in, and then we can get started. All right. Well, welcome to Lunch and Learn. I am Jeremy Litwinowitz. I'm your host today. Um, and we've had two pre-submitted questions today, but I also don't see either of the people that submitted them here today. Um, I don't know, Jeremy, if you have any questions at all. If you want, you can post them in the chat for sure. Um, Otherwise, we can at least try to answer these questions, um, so they're at least in our recording for um, if either of the two that have submitted want to check back later. All right, so the first pre-submitted question that we have is asking about how we can add substates to a folder extension's state. And so this is an interesting question because there's a lot of some neat things that you can actually do with states and substates. Um, Within decisions. And it's kind of a sneaky topic, I would say, because it's not as obvious as states. But we do actually have um, a number of sub-state related steps here that allow us to set substates on things. Um, and so we can actually change different values and not only just have a state, but we can actually have um, a state with its own substates that are kind of set up with it. However, there's a slight problem with this question that's important to bring up. And so I'm just going to show this image from our doc site um, that's related to this. So about these substate steps, all of these substate steps require a process folder of some kind. So in order to actually use the substates, you need process tracking in your setup within your data structures. And the only two data structures that have any kind of process tracking are flow execution extensions and case entities. So in the original question, it had asked how we can add them to a folder extension state, which since folder extensions don't have process tracking, we can't do that. However, with flow execution extensions, we can add a process folder. And there are some ways that we can also include that in case entities as well. But the key here is with the states and any substates that they have, we would need to set up a process folder first. And so if we have a process folder set up, this will only allow us to create something with uh, this will only actually allow us to create an entity here if we have some kind of folder extension. So as you can see here, I only actually have two created in my instance right now. They're both related to our training projects, but these are flow execution extensions. And those are the only options that I have for setting up this process folder if I want to build it based on a data structure that I've created. And so I do have folder extensions in my system, but I can't use them on this process folder step because folder extensions don't have that. However, if I wanted to use one of these, my travel splash, for example, to set up a process folder, I could use that here. And then I can go ahead and add states. So if I needed to add a state, um, I know we have our manager approval state that we use in this particular process for someone submitting a travel request. Managers can go in and approve it. Maybe I have some substates that I want it to go through. I can use that here. But again, it does need to uh, follow with a process folder um, in order to go through that process. So that's the key to answering that question there. Beyond that, once we have one of the two data types that we can actually utilize process tracking with, then the rest of those steps can be completed. And those steps are also in our step library in the documentation site, so we can find more information on those. And they also explicitly say in the step library that they can only be used with in process folders or in case entities. So we can only utilize those if we have one of the two data structures that allow that. So hopefully that'll answer that question. Um, and if you are watching on YouTube later and you still need more clarification, feel free to join another Lunch and Learn, and we can hopefully get that question answered. So that was our first pre-submitted question. The other pre-submitted question is something that I would need more clarification on. I think I just need whoever submitted it, I would need more, I guess, clear understanding of what we're looking for. The question being understanding how to set up results for null or for the next iteration. Um, so I don't know if any of our other panelists on this call have any experience with that or would have any guess as to further information there, but otherwise I would think I would need to hear more from the question submitter on this one to understand more of what they're looking for. With that, do we have any other questions that I could answer today? All right. Um, I'm going to go and let's just see what we can do with a for each step. To see what we can take a look at for this second question. All right, so we'll have a for each step. Let's just create just a fake list here just to test this out, and we're gonna pass in that list. All right, so we've got a for each step. We're gonna take in a list of strings. It's just a bunch of random strings in here, some gaps in between for potential null data. And let's just take a look at what we could do with this. And we'll just use like a simple add item to list step for an example here. Done. Oh, all right. So let's just do our best to hopefully maybe get some answers here. See what we can do on this. Um, so if we have a information going into a for each step, and let's say we have maybe some null data by intention or unintentional going through something that's blank or something that's not through. Um, there are different like outcomes and things that we can adjust, and maybe this is what someone might be looking for. Um, so we can always look for we have these outcome options on steps. So if you want something to be unique based on whatever the first item is, or if there's going to be an exception, perhaps, we have these options. And so it's possible that this is what we're looking for, something related to these. So, changing these and looking at what kind of options are here. Um, if something isn't going through and we have like an exception or an issue that comes up, uh, we can adjust these settings here. So if we don't want something to go through, we can kind of get rid of something. Um, so it could be something related to these outcomes here if we want to change an outcome to adjust or look for those items. Another thing, if you're looking for null data, there are a number of, some of them pre-configured, or we could just set up a rule ourselves. In this particular case, it's something about an object. Um, but, we can look at different null related rules. So if we're looking for if there's some kind of value being null, for example, we could actually look at that here, and we can have this get checked after our for each step, right? So if maybe we're looking for if the item that's going through is null, for example, we don't want to add a null item to our list, then we can just have that go back to the for each step. That way, if we have some null data that's going through our list, it'll skip that and it won't do the rest of the logic to it. So if a user is trying to or is expecting some data to be null in some case, then we can check that and say, oh, this data is null. Let's skip that and let's just keep adding items. Um, that way, the only items that are being added to this list are going to be um, only items that are created, right? So if I were to run this through, I don't think that did what I was expecting. It might maybe my example is kind of poor. Um, if it were to be something more, it's not maybe if it was a more complex data type. Let's do that first. Let's try this. Okay, let's just add a few examples. And let's have that go in. And the item that we'll add the item from each step, and it'll just populate into it. Let's see if that changed anything. That's not quite it either. I didn't input an email on one of those. Try that. There we go. I actually had to make sure there's null data going through. So here we go. This will demonstrate it better. So in that first example, I didn't fill anything out. So the value for the email space was null. So if I'm checking for that particular object, it'll is displaying that as null. So it's going to go down the true path, which means it'll skip my add item to list step. Whereas this one has a value in that particular spot, so it'll run false. So then it'll make sure to add the item to my list. Now, since I didn't do a whole lot of data, there's obviously only one item here in my list at the end. So my new item or new list only has one item in it. But if I were to have, a whole list of things, then it'll check every single one to make sure that that particular item or object is null and it can skip it, and then I can move on for there. So then I can always check and make sure if I have any null data, what I want to do with it, or that I don't have anything extra or um, unnecessary getting added or continuing through my process. Especially because nulls are very easily to get missed or to cause errors on certain steps. Maybe it's not expecting a null, so it'll cause an error, which could mess up the process. So it's always important to include something like this if you're expecting it. And hopefully that'll at least give some direction to that user if they have any further questions. Please attend another lunch and learn or reach out to um, our support team if it's about your projects or your company projects or anything, and they'll be happy to help as well. All right, any other questions? Anything else for the day? All right. Well then, hopefully that at least gave some information to kind of lead people in the right direction. Um, if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to ask, and we will be happy to help. And with that, I think we can end for the day. And we will see you all tomorrow for more lunching and learning.